I was out here the other day and I saw, I was actually walking past this area. I'm gonna get ways back so I can get a kind of a wide shot of this. And there was a bunch of kids walking around here. I think they were with their dad, or at least some of them's dad, and he was fishing, but there was about 4 or 5 of them, and he probably had helped them because you can see that's kind of big. But they had built this here, and I thought that was very very creative. I'm getting here a little closer to it now that you've seen the whole thing from from the side, or from a ways away from it. Here you can see kind of the main tree running down there, and then they're taking all these limbs and leaning them up against it. And they took a lot of little sticks and all. They took some of the big branches and all. And they took just little sticks, sort of fill it in the area. And then here's coming on the inside of it here. I thought, well, that was pretty creative, what they did. So I wanted to come up and I haven't been up here to see that, but since then, today I figured since I was going to do this today, I'd come up here and get a look at it again, see if it's still here. Nobody had tore it down or anything, but now it's preserved. At least everybody gets to see it here on my video. Also, I'll walk back over this way. And you can see here the water in the creek is up. It has been raining today, and it may rain some more. It's let up some for now. But you can see here that the water is definitely up. And even I don't come this way very often as far as going through here, but right here you can see this water. It's running. This is a little big path that goes right over there, and that's part of the road over there. There's the road up there. But you can see the water it comes. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. You can see it up there. And it goes under the road. And you can see coming down through here. There's actually another little stream on the side of it right here. And it comes down through here and then goes down there into the big creek. But this is the reason I show all this, was this is usually not up this much. There's usually not very much water. Sometimes there's none at all. But the rain has caused that. So I wanted to show just a couple of those things before I do the devotional I was going to do today. And kind of because of the rain, it might be raining a bit. I'm going to do it on the inside today, on the inside of the car here. And do the filming from inside there. But I wanted to show that first, and there's that little, I don't know what you'd call that exactly, but make sure I got it on there. Kind of almost like a teepee would have been used, but just sort of a little covering, but nonetheless very kind of creative for those kids to do that. And again, there's that stream up through there. For some reason I locked my door, so I have to unlock it. And try to find a good location to set the camera. Well, I'll look kind of sideways here maybe, but the car was not really designed for for this to be done. So this may be one of the weirder looking things. If you're watching this, you may have to adjust your phone or computer, whatever you're looking at it on, but that's about as good as I can do. Actually, let me try one other way to do it here. Oh yeah, that's where it works better. At least a little bit. Move it back just a hair. There we go. That actually looks better than the most obvious one. Well, I want to continue going through the last week, the Holy Week in the life of Jesus. And yesterday, and by the way, I watched the video after I recorded it, and some parts I realized you may not have been able to hear what I was saying because the wind was so strong. It's one of the reasons I wanted to do this in here. I'm not sure. I don't think it'd be a problem today. It's not as windy, but some parts you have to turn up real loud to be able to hear because of that wind being as strong as it was, and I didn't have the camera in hand. I was so far away from it. But today that should not be a problem in here. And but I want to read today that yesterday I finished up the one I did about the cleansing of the temple and the cursing of the fig tree. And this is what happens right after that. And was reading in Mark's gospel the past couple of days, the ones I did. This one I'm going to read from Matthew's gospel, Matthew 21, and beginning in the 23rd verse. It says, "And when he was come into the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, and said, By what authority doest thou these things? And who gave thee this authority? And Jesus answered and said unto them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I and likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, whence was it? From heaven or of men? And they reasoned with themselves, saying, If we say from heaven, he will say unto us, Why did you not then believe him? But if we shall say of men, we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. And they answered Jesus and said, We cannot tell. And he said unto them, Neither tell I you by what authority I do these things. So Jesus is in the temple now. It says he come into the temple, and the chief priest and the elders of the people, it says, come to him as he was teaching, and they ask him, By whose authority are you doing this? And who gave it to you? By whose authority are you doing this? Where'd you get this authority to do these things you're doing? Now, you have to remember, in the context of what happened the day before, when this happened, is when Jesus comes and cleanses the temple. He comes in and has everyone, he throws out the money changers. And that probably, as you might imagine, caused a little bit of a stir and would arouse some opposition from people, especially from the leadership. And so they want to know about whose authority. Where'd you get the authority to come in here and throw these people out of the temple? You know, who made you the boss here? Who gave you the authority to do this? And we're told there was a couple of different groups. It says the chief priest and the elders of the people. So this was some of the leaders of what we would commonly, or what's known in other places as the council or the Sanhedrin, the Jewish part of the Jewish leadership that existed. And these were the ones that were thought to be in authority. And they're thinking, we didn't give you a license to do this. So where did you get this authority from? Who gave it to you? Maybe what they're wanting to know. Where did you, let's see your license, let's see your credentials, to do what it is that you're doing. And so Jesus asked them, he said, I'm going to ask you something. He says, you've asked me this, I'm going to ask you something. And if you'll answer this question for me, I'll answer your question. And he says, the baptism from John, he says, where did it come from? It says, the baptism of John, whence was it? From heaven or of men? John's authority to baptize. Said, where did that come from? His baptism that he was doing that had been very well known. He says, where did it come from? Where did John get that baptism from? Did it come from heaven or did it come from men? In other words, was this of divine origin, what John did, or is it just something he invented on his own? Or somebody else came up with and he just latched onto it? Where did John, he says, where did he get the authority to do what he did? And so it says, they reasoned with themselves. This was a, kind of a tough question for them to answer. I mean, it's, simple. If it came from, if it didn't come from God, it had to have came from men. It has just been something of his own mind. If it didn't, it came from God. They said, well, let's think about this. If we tell him it came from God, if we say it came from, he says, if we shall say from heaven, he will say unto us, why did you not then believe him? If we say this was of divine origin, his baptism, he's going to ask us, well, why didn't you believe what he said? Why were you opposed to him? Because we can read very easily in Matthew chapter 3, for example, John's opposition to the religious leadership. It says the Pharisees and Sadducees came to him and he rebukes them. He calls them a brood of vipers. So we can see that there was opposition between the two groups, between the Jewish leadership and between John. He says, so if we say it's from heaven, he's going to know, well, why did you oppose him? Why were you opposed to John if this message that he's preaching and the baptism he was doing, if that came from God, if he was on commission from God to do this, why did you oppose him? Why didn't you believe him? So that was one of the things. I said, well, if we say that, that's the response we're going to get from him. On the other hand, they say, if we say it's of men, he says, we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. Well, but if we say, it wasn't from heaven, John just, invented this out of, thin cloth, and he just came up with this on his own, well, then we got another problem. All these people around here will lose their support. They won't support us if we say that John was basically a false prophet or a madman of some sort, or just a nobody out in the river dunking people in the river. If we say something like that, well, we won't have their support because they all believe John's a prophet. They all believe John came from God. So we can't say that either. Well, we can't really come up with a third option, so what's their answer? We don't know. It says they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. Essentially, that was the best option they could come up with. Well, we don't know whether it was from man or from God. That way they avoid him asking, why did you oppose John? Why didn't you believe him? And avoid, on the other hand, making the people mad at him. So Jesus just says to them, says, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Says, if you can't tell me where John got the authority, I'm not going to tell you where I get this authority. You're the religious leaders. You're the experts in this. If you can't tell me whether John's baptism was from heaven or from men, says, well, then I'm not going to tell you anything either. You don't have the right to hear it, essentially. But there's another point, too, that I want to to say on this about what they had said. John was, as often said, was the forerunner. He was the one that was called to come make straight, his path in the wilderness, the path of the Lord in the wilderness, and so forth. He was the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the paths of the Lord. That's a quote from the 40th chapter of Isaiah. And speaking of what John's job was, as he came here, as the forerunner, he was the one that was to make the path ready for the Christ, for the Messiah. And he was not the Messiah. He says that plainly. He says that he said the Messiah, the one coming after me, he said, I'm not worthy to untie his shoes. He said, so I'm not worthy to do that. He said, that's not me. But I'm the voice of one crying in the wilderness. I'm the one that God has sent beforehand to make the way for Jesus, for the Messiah when he comes. John was, in a sense, he was the lesser. Jesus was the greater. We talked about that on one of them I did last week, what Peter had said, that when everybody else was saying you're John the Baptist or one of the prophets, and, like Elijah or Jeremiah or so forth. But Peter says, no, you're greater. So John, as great as he was still lesser than Jesus. But nonetheless, he did have the message from God. He did have the message that God had sent him with. And the religious leaders rejected that. He was, in a sense, the lesser light. We're told that in the Old Testament, the moon being the lesser light to rule the night and the greater light, the sun to rule the day. He was sort of the lesser light. Jesus was the true light. He was the light. And it's a pretty good analogy of it. John reflects, like the moon reflects the sunlight, John reflects the light of God. And if people will reject that, if they're going to reject the lesser, they're going to reject the greater. Jesus' idea, I think here, part of what he's saying is if you won't accept the revelation, the truth that God has given you, you're not going to accept anything else that God gives you. If you rejected the truth that he's given you so far, you're not going to accept any greater truth that he's going to give you. And that was pretty obvious, that as we find later on when Jesus does tell them that he is indeed the Messiah, meaning obviously he tells them later on by just implication where that authority came from to do what he was doing, they reject it. So that's obvious. If they weren't going to accept the truth that God presented to them, they weren't going to accept the greater truth that God would give to them either. So there's no need for Jesus to tell them that because they weren't going to accept it. They had already rejected John. They were going to reject him as well. In fact, Jesus even says in another place in the scriptures, he said, John came neither eating or drinking, and y'all said he had a demon. He says, the Son of Man has come both eating and drinking, and you say he's a glutton, a drunk, and a friend of sinners. He said, so it doesn't really much matter. Y'all were going to reject God's truth, regardless of how it came, or where it came from, or anything like that, because y'all had rejected the message of God. So it didn't much matter what form it came in. And they had rejected John. The idea was, you're going to reject me too, because John was a witness to me, and therefore you rejected him, and you were going to reject me as well. So it's an important thing to note, if we reject the truth God has given us, if we reject the light that he's shown us, there's no need to expect him to give us any more, because we're not even following what he's already given us. So what we know, we must act on that. We must accept that if we hope to be given anything greater. And these people, these leaders, had rejected John, so there was no reason to think they were going to accept Jesus. It was not going to happen. And obviously, very much, it didn't happen. They rejected John. They actually rejected Jesus even stronger. So that was just an obvious thing that was going to happen. But we also see here Jesus was able to sort of outsmart these people. They thought they were going to trap him. What's he going to say? Maybe we can find a way to trap him. But he turned the tables he'd overturned the tables in the temple, and now he turns the tables on them and sort of leaves them looking foolish for their effort in doing so. So that was today's lesson of Jesus's answer about what authority he did those things, which he didn't answer, but we will find obviously later in what he says at his trials and all, when you read on, that he tells them, are you they ask him plainly, are you the Christ? And he says he is. So we know where his authority came from. So that's the way for the devotional for today. And I hope tomorrow, hopefully it's going to be sunny out, and Be able to be outside somewhere tomorrow to be able to do this again for whatever I'll be talking about then. So I hope everyone has a good day. I hope you enjoyed this inside addition to this one today, and hopefully I can be outside again tomorrow in doing this. So hope everyone has a blessed Tuesday. Today's March the 26th, and I hope everybody has had a blessed Holy Week. And I look forward to doing this again, hopefully tomorrow, and I will see you then.